Thursday and
Well,
Friday.
one thing you have to do
Flying
is
out.
pack to go away, yeah.
He doesn't even have to pack, he just walks out.
Thank you. All right. Thank you so much again for coming.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Everyone just introduces themselves? Is that like that?
Kevin McCormick.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Bonson.
John Hadley?
Pat Crowley.
And Chris Ruccio.
All right, we do last time, we just open up, want to tell us a little bit about yourself and
Certainly.
we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I'm Anita Shipers. I'm currently employed by the town of Hubbardston as the town administrator. Brief professional history. I began working in public administration with the city of Worcester. I was the assistant for operations there, and that was my first foray into local government in a paid position, and I quickly became enamored with the role. From there, I became the town administrator for the town of Boylston, was there for several years. I went on to become the town administrator for the town of Ayr, and found that very interesting because the community was going through that very intense Devon's closure conversation with the other host communities of Shirley and Harvard. So it was extremely interesting to be part of that process. From Ayr, I moved on to become the assistant town administrator for the town of Lincoln. And again, totally different community, totally different set of demographics. And after 7 years there, though, I quickly realized that I needed to become fully immersed in being a town administrator again, and took the job in Hubbardston. I've been there for 3 years.
And your interest in this position, is it something different than Hubbardston that we can offer, size of the town or anything like that?
It's the type of community that you are. It's the financial status that you currently hold. I do see more opportunities here. The town of Hubbardston is a wonderful community. They're good people. They treat me well. But it's a community that is in severe financial constraint, and it really does limit a manager's ability to really help the community and do some proactive things. And I'll be very honest in saying I'm looking to, to the opportunity here in West Boylston, because you are a community that is stable financially. You have proactively been moving ahead and doing the right things for your community, and I'd like to be part of that.
Thank you. Okay.
I'm going to skip down to a different one.
You want the same one?
All right. If you were to rate yourself on a 1 to 10 basis, with 1 being the lowest, if you were to basically rate yourself from 1 to 10 in your positions that you've held, 1 being the lowest, 10 being the highest, and why do you give yourself that score?
In terms of my effectiveness in the position,
Your overall, yeah, your effectiveness and your overall performance in the position.
okay. Well, I would definitely say that my effectiveness and therefore my scores have been increasing over time. I'll be very honest and say that when I took the position in Boylston, I was very green. I still had a lot to learn. The community was, I just still am very grateful to them that they took a chance on me to appoint me as their town administrator. But I definitely have been learning and becoming more effective in the role over the years. So I would say that perhaps in Boylston I might have started at a 4 or a 5 and then steadily increased. I think if I had to rate myself today, I would put myself at a 9.
And same scale, how do you think the public from the town of Ayr all the way, from the town of Boylston all the way up through Hubbardston, how would they rate you?
There I would see that the scores would be different. I think that I would score fairly high in each of the communities. I think hopefully you've seen that from the responses you've had from the reference checks that were done. I'm very glad to say that I've been able to develop excellent relationships with town officials and the residents in each of the communities I've worked in. So I would say that my scores for each community would probably be much higher. I would guess that I would be in the 8 to 9 range for each of the communities, despite the fact that I still had a lot to learn as I started out.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Oh, I'm next. This is a real in-depth question now. Here we go. What kind of social events do you attend in the community that you are presently employed?
I enjoy attending social events, but they're on a range of different types of events. Absolutely, as a town administrator, I feel I need to be there, and I enjoy being there for town celebrations, and that ranges everything from a Memorial Day celebration to a parade to the town's field day. I actually bring my husband to social events in the community. I enjoy having an opportunity to show him the community that I'm working in. And those range from school plays, school concerts, a variety of things. I think one of the things that I enjoy most, though, in terms of social interaction, especially in Hubbardston, where I work currently, is meeting with the senior citizens. I make it a point to meet with them every 2 weeks to have coffee with them, so I have a chance to hear what they're dealing with and give them a chance to keep them up to date on what's going on in town. So I really enjoy that social time with the seniors.
Thank you.
What would your first step be upon assuming the responsibilities of the position? And what would you try to achieve within the first 30 to 60 days?
My first step would be to meet with you all and really try to understand what your initial expectations for me would be in the role. You, above all else, would know what the key issues are that you would need me to start jumping into and hit the ground running, so to speak. Obviously, making sure that I meet with all of the staff and department heads to understand what each of the departments are dealing with and how I can support them as they're doing that, that's key. Concurrently, I'd be meeting with all the different boards and committees, attending their meetings, introducing myself, having discussions with them about what they're going through, what issues they're facing, and at the same time, reaching out to the public, whether it's making sure that they understand that I truly do keep an open door policy. I enjoy having the public come to my office, sit down and speak to me, but also other, whether it's meeting with the Lions Club, Garden Club, or whatever other agencies are out there. That's part of my helping to build my understanding of the community, and that all needs to happen in the first 30 days.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with developing municipal budgets?
Okay, well, in each of the communities that I've worked in, well, aside from Worcester, I have been responsible for budget development. Less so with the town of Lincoln, because I was the assistant manager. I was responsible for developing a portion of that budget and oversight for a portion of that budget, but for all the other communities, it was my budget to develop and to present to the Board of Selectmen for their approval and to present to the Finance Committee so that they could give recommendations on what was being proposed. It's probably one of the most important tasks that a town administrator has in their role, because the finances of a community are key. There's nothing else, in my opinion, that is more of a potential problem area for a community, and it's one area where you cannot be lax. You've got to be mindful throughout the entire process, whether when it starts from your revenue projections, that you have to be very sure that you have a very strong handle on what those revenue projections will be for the community. And then even after the budget's been approved and passed by town meeting, it is extremely important to make sure that you've got strong oversight of that budget throughout the fiscal year. And that means checking, every payables warrant to see where each department head stands in terms of their usage of funds, making sure that you're checking quarterly at minimum in terms of the actual revenues that are coming in, to make sure that they're on target with the revenue projections that you've been putting together, which support that budget that the town meeting approves. So I feel I have a lot of experience. It's something, though, that I have definitely approached as a team concept in each of the communities that I've worked in. I work very closely with what I call my financial team, which includes the accountant, the assessors, town clerk, just to make sure that we're all working together to make sure that that budget is as complete and accurate as possible.
Can you explain what your priorities would be in creating an annual budget?
Well, as I mentioned, I think making sure that your revenue projections are spot on is the first priority. You have to be sure that you have a very, very accurate handle on the amount of funds that will be available to support that budget moving forward. It can quickly fall apart if that's not the case. Maintaining the existing town services is extremely important. The other thing, though, that comes into play is making sure that whatever the goals or objectives are for the town, whether they're generated by the Board of Selectmen or whether they're generated by the master plan, have been accepted as goals that the community as a whole wishes to implement, those are all part of what you put into play and balance through when you're developing your budget. So, there's a number of considerations that need to be put in when you're developing that budget.
Okay, and the last part of this question is, give us an example of how you deal with budget requests from departments when there wasn't enough money to fill the request.
Okay, well, and that has happened in each community that I've worked with the exception of the town of Lincoln. That requires truly a collaborative approach. When you are faced with two situations, it could be that that you know that going into the next fiscal year, you just cannot cover all of the requested funds that each department is looking for. You literally have to sit down with each department, explain to them what the financial status is for the town, and work with them to generate multiple level concepts in terms of where cuts can be achieved in their department. They have to be part of that decision-making process. They have to buy into whatever those potential cuts will be. And it's really important to make sure that you're looking at potential cuts at multiple levels, not just one, because you may find as you go through a budget process that the first level of cuts may not be adequate. And so rather than go through that process twice, you want to go through multiple scenarios with each department head. It's important also to keep the chairman, the boards and committees in the loop as well, because they control certain budgets. It's not just department heads. So it really requires a lot of communication and collaboration with everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, if you could give us an example of a time when you reorganized a department or dramatically changed a long-standing process. How did the employees, town officials, and residents respond?
Okay. I'm thinking of three separate instances. All have occurred while I've been working for the town of Hubbardston. The town established a new charter just before I came on board to work with them. I'm the first town administrator to work under the new charter. And that charter required a consolidation of highway, cemetery, facility maintenance into one DPW department. So that required reorganization of budgets, manpower, et cetera. So that was working with all of the existing interested parties, meaning the cemetery commissioners, park commissioners, the existing highway superintendent at the time, and understanding what the expectations are, what the available funds were, what the priorities were for the community for each of those functions, and trying to put it forward in a cohesive manner. I think we've done, over the 3 years that I've been there, we've done a really good job at pulling that together. The only exception is that facility maintenance is one component of that reorganized DPW, and we're still, due to lack of funding, trying to find creative ways, so to speak, in dealing with that. I've been taking advantage of senior tax work-off volunteers to fill that role of custodian and such, to make sure that that responsibility under the reorganization is taking place. The other thing that I did was, when it became apparent that our existing town accountant was going to be leaving the community, I looked into the pros and the cons of outsourcing accounting services, and made the decision that it was probably the best bet for Hubbardston. Hubbardston is a community that pays at a very low wage scale. We are not competitive with the area towns, and I was really worried that I would not be able to attract a town accountant that had the skill sets that I needed for Hubbardston, which I could probably get into more detail about that later as we talk. So I really thought that by outsourcing the accounting services, it was a way for me to make sure that I had very professional, high-level functioning accountant work for the town at a lesser cost than what we might be dealing with otherwise. And so that's been in place since July 1st, and it's working out really well. The third instance is that we dealt with a significant problem in the tax collector office in our community. It became readily apparent that there were some definite irregularities within that office, and not going into a lot of detail, I did have to terminate the existing tax collector. It is a matter currently before the court system. So I gave a lot of thought about the pros and cons, reached out to a lot of my colleagues and communities that have a combined treasurer-collector position, and made the decision that that was the right step for the town to take. So I have combined the treasurer and collector position. I've actually relocated the offices. They're combined in one. We physically modified the space to make sure that there was ability to have the treasurer-collector functions happen. And we were able to do that, increasing the number of hours that the service was provided to the town for coverage for the two offices at a lesser price. We're actually saving about $10,000 a year by doing that combination. And for Hubbardston, a savings of $10,000 a year is significant.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a
Good.
follow-up on
Good.
that? I did do the research and had found out about, the tax problem. Can you tell me, did that person report directly to you?
She did.
She did?
She did.
Okay.
And
And
it
was,
was-
can I, and I don't know if you can answer this because I know it's in court.
Right.
Was it found by you or an audit, or can you not?
I
answer
can go
that?
into basic details,
Yep,
and it's a
that's
very
all I'm
good
looking
question.
for.
When I took the job, one of the first things I had to do was make a decision about the annual audit that needed to be completed. It was past due. And the town had been using the one particular firm for about 10 years. And it just seemed like it was time to make a change. It was time to get a fresh set of eyes on those books. So I went out through an RFP process and I hired the firm of Scanlon and Associates based out of Western Massachusetts to do the audit. And I'm very grateful to say that it was with the help of the auditing firm that the red flags were raised and that we recognized that there were definite irregularities in the tax collector records, and it all kind of just quickly fell into place in terms of understanding what the situation was from there. So I cannot personally claim that I was able to identify that. Without going into detail, the process of fraud that took place was a very interesting scheme, so to speak, and it was definitely hard to recognize that it was taking place at the time because of the layered approach of what was happening. So I was very grateful that we had the experience of Scanlon and Associates who were able to, they've actually experienced that in other communities that they've worked in, and they were able to see the discrepancies and they raised the red flag to me.
Okay. One other follow-up.
Good.
You mentioned that you put these couple of departments under one, that you made the decision that was better. Was that a decision that you made, or did you make a joint with the selectmen that you were working with? How did that come about?
Under the town's charter, it's my decision. However, I do have to notify the Board of Selectmen before doing so. And the town's charter is very similar to the special act that West Boylston has, in that it's the appointment by the town administrator, the town administrator's decision to make recommendations and move ahead with consolidation or reorganization of departments. But it does have to be approved, so to speak, by the Board of Selectmen, as well as any other appointment. Very similar to the process that West Boylston has in terms of appointments.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
How would you correct a department that the general consensus of the populace is that the department is underperforming?
I'm actually going through that situation right now in Hubbardston with one of my department heads. I think that one of the things you need to gain an understanding on is whether it's a situation of perception or whether it's actual lack of performance. And the situation I'm dealing with in Hubbardston right now is a combination of the two. So in that, as the supervisor of that department head, I need to, be very carefully monitoring what's being done, through review of the action items and the expectations of that department. I have to look to see, what components of the job, what key aspects of the job is that department head meeting or not meeting. And then helping the public, including the Board of Selectmen, understand what the true reality is. Whereas some of it is some performance or mistakes, so to speak, in the job, and the other part of it is a sense of perception, and help them understand what the appropriate method of approach is to the situation. I currently have that situation happening in Hubbardston. It's ongoing. It's been my responsibility to make sure that the selectmen are educated as to what the true level of performance is for that individual, and to make sure that they understand how that compares to other department heads in other communities, making sure that they understand that what may be perceived as a lack of competency is not necessarily so, that you will see the same issues, same set of concerns in other communities as well. So it's a bifold effort on the town administrator's part to help the community deal with that. In the end, it's my responsibility, if the individual is truly not performing up to standards, it's my responsibility to jump in, put a performance improvement plan into place, and to track that very carefully. But I think that, you really do need to be sure that it is 100% a lack of performance and not necessarily just a discrepancies in perception in terms of what needs to be taking place. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Okay.
I go again. What information did you review in preparation for this interview, and what did it reveal about the town? From doing all that, did anything stand out?
Okay. The first step that I took to try to understand the community and to determine whether I'd be a good fit for you was that I called up Leon and had a long conversation with him to learn about the town, about you as a board, about what's been going well in the town, what may need to be addressed in the future. And I have to say that after the conversation with him, I definitely had a comfort level that it was, this was a role that I could handle and could be successful in. But in continuing with my due diligence, I've been spending the past month or so poring over your website, reading the minutes of all of your various different boards and committee meetings. I've been looking over all the documentation on DOR so I could get an understanding of what your financial status is. I've been reading newspaper articles to see what the current issues are that are before the different boards and committees. And in terms of my findings, I was very gratified to see that the town is in very solid financial footing. You have a solid bond rating. You're being very proactive and careful in terms of putting together a progressive capital improvement plan. You're taking good care of your facilities and your infrastructure. I was also pleased to see that you're taking some innovative steps, although these days perhaps less innovative. It's becoming more common. But you're doing the ESCO project with the schools. You've finished phase 1. You're about to start phase 2. The light department is looking to do the solar panels on the closed landfill. And these are the types of things that give me a feeling of interest and excitement about being part of what you're doing in the community, because all of you, all the different entities in the town are moving ahead with implementing what your master plan has identified as being key steps that the town needs to work toward. And so that gives me a good feeling in terms of being interested in this community, and I'd like to be a part of that.
So I'm just curious, I know you lumped a bunch of things, but did anything stand out more, or just all those things together?
I think the thing that I found most interesting was that you're one of the few communities that's actually consistently moving ahead with implementing all of the action items for your master plan. Your master plan had a set of diverse steps that were recommended to be taken, and I'm not sure whether that role is being covered by the planning board or whether you have a separate implementation committee, but just by reading the minutes of all of your boards and committee meeting minutes, it shows that you're taking all of those steps. You're actually moving ahead and working on each of those action items. Whether it's, as I said, maintaining infrastructure or continuing to work on developing your subsidized housing inventory. It's good to see that the community's proactively moving ahead and checking off all those boxes.
Thank you.
How will you go about assessing the strengths and weaknesses of an organization and identifying ways to improve it? Once you said you're gonna meet with the department heads.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of that initial feedback does come from the department heads, because they know better than I would what's going well, what's not going well. I'm going to walk into the situation assuming that everything is in a stable condition, but I definitely need their insight as to what's happening. A lot of that also comes from my interaction with the other boards and committees and with the public. I'm going to be a sponge, so to speak, for the first few months of this, so I can really get a sense of what things people are excited about and what things people are concerned about. And that's going to be key to helping me understand what we might need to do to move forward, what changes might need to be made, what things we might need to put a little bit more effort into.
You've already answered part of this question, and I know you can't really comment much further on the tax collector person, but in your past experience as a town administrator, have you had to terminate anyone? If yes, what was the process that was followed? And then did the town or city face any legal repercussions for the termination? I don't know if you could speak to a different thing because of what's going on with the tax collector. You've kind of covered that already.
No, absolutely. In each community I've worked on, I've had to go through the process of terminating an employee. And each situation is different. It really, it's situational. It depends on what the infraction is that occurred. I have been through processes where I have set up a performance improvement plan with an employee, and for whatever reason, the employee just didn't have it in them to make the necessary improvements within the time frame necessary to live up to the expectations of that position. And so that's where the role of progressive discipline really is a good tool for a town administrator, because you follow it completely, you document completely, and you can move ahead with a termination and know that there will not be repercussions in that process. I went through a process of terminating an employee where the documentation wasn't as complete as it could have been, and knowing that there may be potential for liability on the town's part to take strong action, what I ended up doing was to negotiate a settlement agreement with that individual, a resignation agreement, which spelled out and therefore reduced the town's liability in that process. I've been through several instances in several communities where the infraction was egregious and definitely was terminable offense. In one of those instances, the town would have been in a very difficult position if that employee had left immediately. And while the offense was terminable, it was necessary for me to look to see what the impact of the department would be if that employee left immediately. And in this instance, it was a DPW employee. It was last winter. We were in the middle of those back-to-back snowstorms where we were being inundated, and the crews were needed to be out there almost every day. And to terminate that individual immediately would have been a significant hardship for the town, because in the middle of winter, it's extremely difficult to find replacement qualified drivers who have both a CDL license and a hoisting license. So I made the decision to do a resignation agreement with this individual that kept that individual on up to a specific date and time, so that I knew that he would be available to continue to work the operations of the department as we needed to. But when that date came, he was terminated, and it worked out really well. Another instance, it was a much more egregious offense, and it required immediate termination. And I've never had any repercussions, legal repercussions, in any of the employee discipline or termination processes that I've been involved with. The only thing I have been through was one instance where an employee who was terminated attempted to file for unemployment benefits after the fact. And thankfully, due to the careful records that the department head and I kept on that process, when we went to the hearing that the DUA held, we were able to show our standing, and they ruled in our favor of the town, so that that employee did not get unemployment benefits.
Just as a follow-up, did you ever have, are any of the terminations you ever had to do, were they people that you had appointed or hired? Or were they in place?
One of the individuals was someone who I did hire in my term of being in town, yes.
Thank you.
Let's see. How do you communicate with coworkers? Would you prefer that your interactions be formal or informal?
I'd say that I use a combination of both, and it really does depend on the situation. I use email a lot, and I find that it's a way to provide clear direction that is documented. It basically creates a trail, so that if any questions come up in terms of what took place regarding that issue, what communication, what decisions, what directives, email can instantly be retrieved and shown to be used to document the process. But for most day-to-day situations, I prefer just going to the person and speaking face-to-face. And I think that that's a way that you can maintain good relations with an individual. I think a lot of people feel that, well, again, depending on the issue and what you have to say, having that face-to-face conversation, they feel is much more comforting, much more less threatening, so to speak, for the individual. But it really does depend on the situation. There are times, obviously, when it does require a much more formal process and memos are issued. And those are typically when it's something that involves every department consistently aboard. So then I would send out a formal memo that they would all receive.
Thank you. And then, what is your professional achievement you are most proud of?
Well, a number come to mind. First one that's coming is we just successfully completed a land swap with DCR for 12 acres of land. It's a very difficult thing to do,
No, it isn't. We do it all the time.
The town had been in conversation with the state for years about the potential of establishing a land swap because the town was looking to find a site that was centrally located. Initially, that site was intended to be simply for the senior center that was being proposed. But when I came on board and we started having additional discussions, I asked the Board of Selectmen to consider asking for more land than just the 4 acres that had previously been considered, because it was an opportunity for us to establish a site for future municipal facilities as well, not just a senior center. Hubbardston has significant facility needs, major repair, major replacement of certain facilities. So to acquire more land on that site would be beneficial in the long run for the town. So it was a very interesting process to work with then Senator Brewer on negotiating that land swap with DCR. And it took 2.5 years, but I'm very pleased to say that we were successful in that, and we just had what we called our land swap celebration in January of this year to celebrate the transaction of the deeds, the swapping of the deeds. So it was it's something that I am very proud of. I found out by a representative of DCAM after the fact that it was one of the fastest land swaps that have ever taken place between a community and DCR, and that felt very good to me.
Jeez. No,
Can I
Kevin's
just
got
ask a follow-up
Yeah,
question?
I love to hear.
Well, no, but when you had Senator Brewer, that didn't hurt it.
It didn't hurt at all.
How much land did you have to give them for your 12 acres?
That's a good question. We initially had proposed that we would give them a 17-acre parcel of land that, while located in Hubbardston, could only be accessed by going through the town of Barry. It was located on a small gravel road, and it had no use for the town. So that was the first parcel that we identified. We identified that because we knew that it was on the wish list of DCR as a property that they'd like to acquire for part of their watershed area. However, when we went through the appraisal process, we appraised the value of the DCR parcel that we'd be acquiring, and we appraised the value of that 17-acre parcel. The values basically were irregular, and in order to do a land swap, you were obligated to prove to the state that it's equal or greater value as to what you're providing to the state in that land swap. So we then went back to the drawing board and said, do we have another parcel of land that the town owns that DCR would be interested in acquiring? So we did identify another parcel of land that was wetlands, again located in their watershed area, and that was a 35-acre parcel of land. So we went back to town meeting, obtained the authorization to include that as part of the land swap, and the town meeting did approve it. And when the appraisals were redone, we actually ended up being a little bit ahead of value than what was the value of the land that we were acquiring from the state. So it was approximately just under 60 acres of land that we were swapping to DCR for the 12 acres of centrally located land.
It sounds like.
That's about fair, isn't it?
Yeah, sounds like DC.
Sounds just like
We had many good conversations with DC. I'm sorry.
They
go
probably
ahead.
would have taken it anyway, so I think that was worth the swap.
yeah.
Chris,
Okay, what is the worst situation that ever happened to you as an administrator?
I would have to say, hands down, it was the situation I dealt with the tax collector fraud. That is not a situation that any town administrator wants to find themselves in. You know, it was very challenging. It couldn't have happened at a worse time because we were just preparing to apply for the town's first ever bond rating. And the treasurer and I were working very hard to pull together all the documentation that was needed to go before the bond rating agencies to, you know, to get a reasonable bond rating for the town. We had some debt that the town had incurred. We were still working off the temporary borrowings, the bans, and we needed to do a permanent borrowing, and we wanted to get that bond rating in place so that we could get the best interest rate possible when doing the permanent borrowings. So when we found out that this situation was before us, I really felt a moment of despair, wondering what that meant in terms of the ability of the town to obtain a reasonable bond rating, or if we could even obtain a bond rating. And we were running short. As you know, it's a limited amount of time, number of years that you can carry over the bans, and on one of those borrowings, we were running up against the limit. So that was probably the worst situation I've dealt with. But I have to say that by working very carefully with our bond counsel, we were able to pull it off, and we achieved a AA+ bond rating for the town. So, you know, I have to say it was the worst situation I've ever dealt with, but in the end, it was also one of the most positive outcomes that I've ever dealt with.
Okay, thank you.
Me, I feel like Dr. Ben Carson. I'm way at the far end and I never get to talk, so here we go. Pretty good. All right, he's in the Republican debates. You probably never watched those, Chris.
I have.
I saw your name in the paper today for the, the Democrat thing. All right, how long do you expect to work in West Boylston if you're selected? How long would you like to be here?
Well, I have 10 to 12 years of time before I would be really ready to retire, so I'd like to be there for that entire time. I really enjoyed being a long-term employee with the town of Lincoln. And if it weren't for the fact that I was chafing at the bit to really get back into being a full-time administrator, I would have enjoyed staying longer. I think one of the joys, the best part about being a town administrator is becoming a part of the community. And that only happens if you're there for an amount of time. You need to immerse yourself in the community and be part of the community. So I'd like to be here as long as you'll have me.
Okay, great. Well, we've only had 2 in the last 20 years. So.
Yes.
Okay, if you were selected, when might we see you in the corner office? Because the town administrator's office is in the corner.
Oh, you're right.
That's right. It's the corner office. So when might we be
With a
able to
window.
see you here? If you were selected?
If I were selected, I am obligated by contract to the town of Hubbardston to give a 6-week notice. So, and
That's the answer I wanted, without asking you directly. Okay, what kind of management style do you see yourself bringing to the job with reference to how you handle the public, the officials, and the employees?
let's start with the employees.
Okay,
I would describe my style as being team building, and it's the only process I've used, and I find it very effective. It's important for employees, no matter which level, whether they're supervisors or further down the chain, they need to feel like they're part of the process. They need to feel like they're part of the decision-making process. And that happens best in a team, in a collaborative environment. And that's the way I've been working for years, and hopefully my references show that I've been successful at that. When it comes to town officials, I feel like I have a leg up on that, so to speak, because I have been a town official. I've been an elected town official. I've been an appointed town official. So I have been in your shoes. I've sat in those chairs. So I do have an understanding of of the role that you play and the things that you deal with as you move ahead in your official capacity for the town. So I think, though, that the most important thing in leadership with town officials is communication. All boards and committees need to be kept in the loop as to what's happening. And that's where I love having email be available, because it's an easy way for me to just reach out to all the chairs of the boards and committees and just quickly let them know things that are happening. One of the things that I found very effective in Hubbardston is to have annual joint board meetings where we can, in the fall of each year, we all meet, we all sit down and talk about what's been happening for their board or committee during the year and what things that they'd like to see be worked on in the coming year. Some of those decisions will involve financial obligations, and so by timing it in the fall, it really helps us all understand what we may need to do in terms of prioritizing some of these things as we build the budget for the next fiscal year. And then in terms of the public, again, communication is key, and that's where a town administrator has to be out there and be open to the public. And that you do that by going to those events, by going to the senior center and having coffee, by attending those meetings, asking to be invited to be part of their meetings, and then just keeping that open door, literally an open door, where people can feel comfortable to come in and just sit down and talk.
Thank you. I get one more, and I think I shut off.
You're all done.
Give an example, well, maybe you've already answered this, but give an example of how you've handled a difficult situation, maybe other than a firing. We have a townsperson who's complaining about an issue in a neighborhood. How's that? Without telling you the neighborhood.
I think it's the first thing is to attack it right on. It depends on what the issue is, but definitely pulling the parties together to have a discussion, I felt, is the best way to deal with it. Getting everybody to the table. You're able then to really talk through what the issues are, brainstorm in terms of what potential solutions are. By doing that quickly and doing it in a joint discussion, by having everybody who might be part of creating a resolution to that problem be there. The person who's issued the complaint, whether it's a citizen or an employee or what have you, they recognize and they see the level of commitment that you have and the other town employees have to trying to reach a resolve. I hope that answered your question.
No, that's fine. All right, if I can ask one last question. I see on your resume that you list your address is in Lunenburg.
That's correct.
Where you live.
I do.
In Lunenburg.
Mhm.
Did you live, I guess maybe this is none of my business, but did you live in Lunenburg prior to getting the job in Lunenburg? Or did you move to Lunenburg?
No, I live in Lunenburg. I'm working in Hubbardston.
Oh.
I've never worked in
I never
Lunenburg.
mind, I figured it. I'm in the wrong town. All right, go ahead. I quit. That's why they don't let me talk about it. All right.
Can you tell me what you would consider one of your strengths?
Problem solving. And I actually have to say that I think that's one of the most enjoyable parts of the job, too.
Okay. As a follow-up to that, I noticed on your resume, like when you were in air, it says Town Administrator, Chief Administrative Officer. And then, if I'm following this right, then you went to the Town of Lincoln
Right.
as the assistant. So
Correct.
can you tell me the difference between those two positions, just in general? Because I kind of focused in, I think I've seen the Chief Administrative Officer listed a couple times. I think, was that in Boylston as well?
It was.
Yeah, so what's,
So the difference was that by taking the assistant town administrator position in Lincoln, I was basically taking very much a secondary role.
okay,
But as is common in many larger communities, there are key roles and responsibilities that an assistant town administrator is assigned to. And that includes playing the role of the HR person, chief procurement officer, let's see what else, handling legal issues, and then, addressing any special projects or whatever. So the town administrator and I, because I came to that role having significant experience as a town administrator, we did change that up quite a bit. He felt comfortable with my ability to handle more than just what was the traditional role of an assistant town administrator.
Okay. Okay. What is one goal that you would set for the town and yourself to accomplish the first year?
I'm not sure I could answer that question yet, because I would need time really to determine what the priorities are of the town. And that would be something that I would rely very heavily on you as a board to help me figure out. I know that you as a board, I'm sure, have your own set of goals that you'd like to implement in this year or the coming fiscal year. And, you know, obviously I would want your input in terms of, should we be focusing on one of those goals as being the key item to move forward with? Or do you feel that there's something separate that I should take on by myself? And I honestly don't know that I have an answer to that at this point. I'd need more information.
Okay. Can you tell me how you see the role between the board and yourself working?
Even with the special act, I still feel that in any community, the role of the town administrator is there to support the Board of Selectmen. I'm going to be the one who makes sure that you have all the information that you need to do your job, to make your decisions. There are times when I'm going to play devil's advocate and ask you to look at other options or rethink your initial decisions so that I can be sure that every possible positive and negative outcome of that decision's been considered. I'm there to be your arm to implement whatever policies that you develop. You're the policy-making body. I'm the person who implements those policies for you through the use of either myself directly or through the staff. And I think the most important thing, though, is to be that key role of communicator for you between the public, but also, you know, between other boards and committees that take place. You all have a lot on your plate, as do the other boards and committees, and I enjoy playing that role, that function of helping to improve communication between all the different boards and committees. That's an important part of the job, and it's also a very enjoyable part of the job.
Okay. Can you give an example when you were able to meet the professional demands of the similar position, yet still maintain a healthy balance in your personal life? As we all know, there's a lot of hours in this job.
There are a lot of hours. I can't think of, I'm not sure how to answer that specifically, but I do know that maintaining that balance has always been a priority of mine. There are long hours. Town administrator needs to be there to do the job, whatever number of hours it takes. I try very hard not to bring work home unless I absolutely have to. My husband and I both try to keep that balance of time where we can set aside time for ourselves over the weekends. But obviously, priority for the town is important, and, I will be there whenever I need to. But I think for me, it's working with my husband to make sure that we're both balancing the time that it takes to do our jobs effectively against making sure we maintain time for ourselves, individually and as a couple.
Okay, thank you.
Can you describe an area where you struggle with and should continue to work on developing?
I'm not sure I would call it struggle, but definitely I think that it's the area of accounting where I've always felt that I don't have a firm grasp of all the requirements and regulations that are associated with accounting at the government level. I rely heavily on my finance team, my accountant, to help me understand what the ramifications are of GASB and other regulations that dictate how we go about all of the accounting processes in the town. And every town that I've worked in, one of the first teams that I pulled together is my finance team, because I do rely so heavily on their expertise and their knowledge to help me make decisions.
And how do you see your role as a town administrator in working with the superintendent of schools and the school committee?
Oh, that's key. The school budget is anywhere from 50 to 60% of the town's operating budget in West Boylston. I know it's just a little bit over 50%, and you have to have a good working relationship with the superintendent, with the business manager, with the school committee. I think that's one thing that I take pride in being able to do. Matter of fact, in the town of Hubbardston, the Quabbin Regional School District just appointed me as the chair of a subcommittee that's responsible for working with the state under the Community Compact program and with the Department of Education to look to the Quabbin Regional School District budget and hire a consultant and do an in-depth analysis in terms of what all the budget drivers are for the Quabbin Regional School District. We are having problems annually trying to make this work. We're a 5-community region. Hubbardston is one of the wealthier communities, so to speak, in that region. And it really has been problematic for us to fund that regional school district budget properly. So we're very excited to be working with the Division of Local Services and to get a grant through that Community Compact Cabinet program to work with a consultant to do an in-depth analysis on that. Sean Cronin, who's heading the program for the Division of Local Services, is kind of excited because he sees what we're doing under this process as being a model for other regional school districts. We are not alone in the state in terms of having this problem of difficulty funding and continuing to fund regional school districts. So he's hoping that the outcome of the process that we're taking right now will be helpful to inform other districts in the future and perhaps start a much larger statewide conversation about the whole problem. And, you know, I think the fact that the school committee appointed me as being chair to that process speaks to my ability to, you know, develop an effective relationship with them and with the school superintendent.
Can I have a follow-up to that,
Sure.
Chairman? You've only worked with regional schools, is that correct? All the towns you've been in?
In Lincoln, we had a regional high school
Yeah.
and middle school, and we had a local elementary school.
Okay.
All the other school systems were regional.
So you've dealt with multiple superintendents?
I have.
Okay. Not that we have multiples, but I was just curious.
It'll be easy, we only have one.
Right, you only have one,
Yeah.
and she's excellent.
I get to talk, all right. If I were to ask any member of your current Board of Selectmen to describe you in 3 words, what would the 3 words be?
Capable, efficient, and collaborative.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. In regards to economic development, what have you been able to do in your current town or other towns that you worked in?
In air, we had wonderful opportunities for economic development. We were able to, by working with Mass Development as part of that Devon's closure process, we were able to provide wonderful resources in the form of incentives, tax incremental financing, and other opportunities to entice businesses to come to the town. So that was very exciting. That definitely increased not only the economic development, the commercial and industrial tax base in the town of Air, but also in the region as well. In Lincoln, it was the exact opposite. Lincoln took great pride in not having a commercial tax base, commercial or industrial tax base. So there really was no opportunity in that instance to work on that. In Hubbardston, the commercial and industrial tax base is very small. We're just basically combined at about 3%. And because the town is in financial constraints, one of the things that the Board of Selectmen and I have been working on is to generate the concept of building economic development opportunities in the town. The zoning is extremely limited, so part of that involves having conversations with the planning board to have them be open-minded to looking to changing the existing zoning. Another complication that Hubbardston has is that a good 70% of the town has some sort of restrictions placed on it, whether it's because it's a wetland or it's conservation restricted, owned by DCR, what have you. So it's very difficult to find opportunities where you can have sections of the town that it would be appropriate for commercial or industrial development. So we're working on it.
Okay.
All right, now, do you have any questions for us?
I have a lot of questions for you, more than I would have time to ask you tonight. But no, I think I have a good handle on the community. If you were to offer the job to me, I would certainly enjoy having opportunity to sit down and talk to all of you about all the different questions that are flowing through my head right now. But I think I have a very good comfort level that I could do this job for you and do it well. So I really appreciate your time tonight and having a chance to discuss this.
I really appreciate you coming in, did a great job, and we'll be in touch.
Okay,
Thank you so
very
much.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, my hands are cold.
Oh, thank you, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.
Same,
Very
thank
nice to meet
you.
you.
My hands are cold.
Thank you, nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Are you cold?
You better not be turning that down, Chris.
Put it down, put it down.
I'm cold, you must be frozen. What, to go run over there?
She blames me all the time even when it's off.
Oh, we're taking a recess, sorry.
Just walked out.
I guess that's your job, we need to announce we're gonna recess until the next candidate.
Nice to meet you.
What is this? Why do we have this? No.
I don't know, Elaine Noga called me, said she's gonna, Tim wanted us to have that.
For today? I'm really messed up now. Doesn't take much to mess me up. All right.
All right, thank you so much for coming, appreciate it,
Thank
Linda.
you.
Did you all sit? Can you give us a brief introduction, tell us about yourself and why you're interested in the position?
So, my name is Lindsay Pope Dahlberg, and I am currently the Chief Procurement Officer for the town of Lexington, Purchasing Director. The reason that I'm here is I love this community. I think it's a great community. I'm not one to try to leave my position without a very good reason. Lexington's a wonderful community. I couldn't ask for a better place to work presently, and they're very supportive. They know I'm here. They're not particularly thrilled because they're afraid of losing me, but at the same time, they're very supportive of it. They're happy for me, and that's wonderful. I picked West Boylston, and of course, there's a lot of towns actually requesting town managers and town administrators at this time, and the only reason why I picked this particular community out of any others, and I'm not actively applying anywhere else, is because of the community itself. West Boylston has a lot of things that are very attractive as far as I'm concerned. I like that it's a small community. I like that it has a lot of ties to the community. Everyone seems to know each other. They're very passionate about what they do and do not want. It's something that's very similar in Lexington. People are very involved in the community, and I do like that they have that tie to it, that it is their land, it is their town. I love that. And here it's very similar. It also has a small town mentality, which I really enjoy. I think that's a great thing. I've worked with Marty McNamara, who is the town administrator next door in Boylston. I've known him for quite some time. He was in Stoughton when I was. And he is one of the people that really kind of influenced me to come this way because he is from this area, he loves it, and he tells me all about it all the time. And he said, you really, really should come and try to come next door if you can. So I took a look at everything, and I said, maybe it's worth putting my resume out on the line and making my boss a little upset. But I think it's really worth it in the end. It has so many great things going for it, and I know a lot about some of the problems that are going on because of what I've studied in the past. I know a lot about watersheds, and I understand the problems that are going on, and I wouldn't want to walk into a town that I didn't understand those types of things. So for me, it's just been an attractive package completely through.
And how does your experience qualify you for this position?
So I've been the Chief Procurement Officer of 2 different towns. I've worked directly for the town manager in Stoughton, and I work for the assistant town manager and the town manager in Lexington. I have to do a lot of special projects. Now, part of my job says special projects coordinator, and what that actually means is that whenever the town manager needs something very specific, or the assistant town managers do, they come to me and ask me to go ahead and work on those things. I work with town council on a lot of litigation. I do a lot of discovery. I handle a lot of things that have to stay off the record for quite a bit of time, more privacy issues that need to be teamed up and coordinated amongst a lot of different departments. And I do work with every single department in the entire town, which no other entity has to do that other than the town manager himself. So being able to work with all those groups and being able to coordinate with them and work nicely and make sure things get done, as well as help forecast for projects, help them prepare for their budgets because they need to know what's going to go out to bid, how much they think it's going to cost, what it's cost in the past. All of those things are very similar to what the town administrator is doing on a fairly regular basis, is all that coordination. In Lexington, there's a lot of assistant town managers. There's a lot of people. So there's more hands doing that work, and I happen to be one of them. So I did get lucky in that I've been able to do forecasting and do projections and work on budgets for a substantial amount of time. I've been doing budgets since 2009 at MAPC. I broke out NERAC into all the 4 different Homeland Security regions. We went from a smaller $20 million budget to a roughly $45 million budget overnight. And that had to all be built out. The inventory had to be built out for every bunker in the entire, state of Massachusetts. All of the budgeting had to be broken out and changed, and it had to be organized into separate groups. So there's a lot of work that goes into all of that, and I'm used to doing it, and I have no problem doing it.
In your professional experience, what could you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest?
Well, wouldn't everyone love to say that they're 10? I would love to say that, but I know that I do have my faults, and I'm sure that anybody can find one. So I would say I'm probably, if you factor in faults in general and the fact that I'm probably further at the beginning of my career than the end of my career, I'd give myself an 8.5 or a 9.
And in the jobs you've had in public life, you obviously have interaction with the public. How would the public rate you?
Probably a 10, actually. I worked at the Registry of Motor Vehicles as an intern, and nobody tried to kill me. So I think that that's a 10 right there.
It's a joke, I like that.
That'd be really good. Kevin, speaking of that, you're up.
Thanks.
Wow. I guess my first question is we don't have a bunker. How come we don't have a bunker?
Put that on the
Anyway,
wish list.
what kind of social events, if any, in your current job, do you attend in the community where you are now, I guess, in Lexington, or in Stoughton?
Today alone, we had a swearing in, so those are very regular. They're in town hall on a fairly normal basis, a couple a month, and we all go to the town meeting room and congratulate the person who is being sworn in or being changed into a higher position for the police or the fire. So we're always at that. Lexington is very historical, so we have a lot of those events. We have parades, we have, all kinds.
Shootouts on the common?
They do have reenactments. I've never made it to the reenactments. They are at 5 o'clock in the morning. So my baby likes to get up at that time, but I do not. So they have a lot of great events, and I've been to a lot of them. And in Stoughton too, I went to a lot of the town meeting days, which they had a lot of them. Lexington has a habit of having 14 or so days of town meeting. And on top of that, I went to Board of Selectmen meetings on a regular basis. I'm pretty sure my face is recorded several times somewhere in an archive. And I've spoken at them. I've also, in Stoughton, I was active in the community for doing canned food drives, working in the building where they sorted them. I actually would bring my 2 stepchildren, because they're older. I'd bring them there and they would help sort. They'd also help clean. And we worked together with the group that did that for quite some time. The only time we ended up stopping wasn't because I was leaving, was actually because the person who ran the program had passed away. So I'm very active. I like to be in the community a lot. I like to do a lot of volunteer work, both in my own personal communities where I live and reside, as well as in the communities that I'm working in.
Okay, thank you.
What would your first step be upon assuming the responsibilities of the position? And what would you try to achieve within the first 30 to 60 days?
For me, I think this is a tricky question. And the reason why is because the most important thing for me in the first even 6 months is to really just find out from all of the department heads what's going on. What's going on in your department? What are your needs? Why is this the way that you do the things that you do? I'm not in there to start changing everything and, breaking things up and saying I know better than they do. I don't. They've been here, I have not. So I think it's really important to make sure that you meet with everybody. You find out why practices are in place. You find out why they do the things that they do. Because even though you may not agree with something coming in and you're onboarding, you may look at it and find out from the staff that it's there for a very good reason. And it makes a whole lot of sense. So I don't like to bring my opinions in when I start, and I don't like to say I'm going to do something, because I think that you definitely need to work with everybody first. So if I'm going to do anything, it's start meeting with everyone. I know they've been without a town manager for quite some time. The chief even said he'd love to, be able to organize some things, talk to some people, figure out what's the next step going on here. And I think that would probably be the most important thing to do in the first 30 days.
Thank you.
That's me. What is your experience with developing municipal budgets?
So I developed the budgets when I was in MAPC, and those were for multiple municipalities across the entire state. So there's the Northeast region, there's the Southeast region, there's Franklin County, so out west, and there's also Central region, which I believe West Boylston falls into. And all of these groups have, all their first responders need training. They needed items. Everything from, trailers full of emergency gear to a training to make sure they're good at doing, a rope pull out of an emergency situation during a flood. So I organized all of those budgets on multiple municipalities over the entire state back at MAPC. And then moving forward, I then started working at DOR. And DOR, we work with lots of different communities, obviously. And then moving on to Stoughton, I was doing a lot of projections. I was helping with budgets. We were under a unique situation. It's still going on where there was a lot of corruption before our team came in to try to help fix what had happened and clean things up and get it more organized. So budgets needed to be reevaluated. Everyone's, mileage sheets had to be looked at. Every single line item had to. So we put a $0 purchase order limit. So every single thing had to be accounted for. And that was very much a build-out process as well. And I worked with Frank Crimmins, who was the town manager there, and he's now the town manager of Avon. And we worked really well together doing that. Marty was also on that team as the HR director. And it helped because you get to meet with every single town director each week and say, what's going on, where do we need to go, who needs what, and we all would work together each week and do that to build everything out and make it nice and clean because there was so much money lost during the corruption scandals. After that, we moved on to Lexington. And in Lexington, I do my own budget, obviously, but I also work with the budgeting officer to help her understand fuel budgets, energy budgets. I work with the sustainability and green team so that they can bring down budgeting on energy as well. So we're building, we just did an electricity audit. We did some solar on rooftops, landfills. I had to climb up some lovely landfills out in Cape Cod, which smell wonderful. And then we also do the yearly forecasting. So we're going through every single purchase that's made under certain groups to make sure, A, they don't go over any limits procurement-wise. So if they're per vendor per fiscal year, how much have we spent? Do we think we need an on-call contract next year? Do we think we don't? If so, have we budgeted for that? And then I also, every month, usually bi-monthly, I look at all purchases that are going through over a certain amount of money to make sure that everyone's aware if they're overspending in a certain area. And that way they can plan for the future, because a lot of the time it's not intentional if someone's missing a threshold or going too far in something. It's usually that they need to get something to special town meeting or they need to go get a bid put out and clean that up before it becomes a problem. So I'm very used to dealing with budgets on a weekly, daily basis.
Next part of that question, as far as creating an annual budget, explain what your priorities would be in creating the budget.
So the first thing is every community is a nonprofit. Money coming in has to stay, and it's not a profit. We're not going to keep any extra and put it in our pockets for later. But at the same time, because of that, we only have a limited amount of money. It's not like we're going to make money off of something on a regular basis either. We can't, project that we're going to do better unless we start doing things like raising taxes, which nobody's really going to want us to do. So working within the confines of the system is the first thing, making sure everyone is realistic about what they're purchasing, about what they're needing, about everything from projected overtime for police, because that's always an issue, you know. If you don't have enough police officers, people are working 80-hour weeks, and then it comes to double time or triple time, then they need time off, and then there's the issue of, is that gonna be an injury liability? Are you gonna have insurance problems? What are we looking at for all of those things? Those are kind of the hidden costs that I find, or the medical, the insurance, the overtimes. And really taking a look at your last 3 years of budgets to project for that, I think is very important. And seeing if your budget is realistic for what you need. And if it's not, you have to ask the hard questions, which is, where are we gonna take this from? What are we gonna do with it? And that's when you need all hands on deck. I think that everybody should have a say in that, and everyone should be working together to find out where can this money feasibly come from. And I know nobody wants to hand over money and nobody wants to have it taken away, but it's something that I think that if you're kind to each other and you work together and you are realistic, everyone can do it, and it's not that painful of a process.
If there is no money to come from, how do you deal with, you get a department that says, hey, I need X dollars, and there is no X dollars? How do you deal with a situation like that?
Well, there's a couple different ways you can do it. You can see if there is a way to increase revenue coming in. Now, that could be the hard and, you know, nasty tax issue, which, you know, when I lived in California, they were always raising taxes. It seemed to be their best way to bring in revenue in a pinch in Southern California. But I think that that's the worst case scenario. I think you have to start looking at moving around free cash first, because that's the easiest way. If there's no way to move around that, you need to start looking at everybody's budget and seeing what capital articles are necessary this particular year. Which ones can we wait on? You know, we can't wait on snow plowing. That's not going to change. You know, we need that every year. We're not going to be able to wait on having, you know, police go out and police the town. Those are important things. So you have to find out items that can be put off. And that's where I would probably look first and have those hard conversations with folks that may want something, but it may be more of a want than a need. And then we can shift the money in that particular case.
Give us an example of a time when you reorganized the department or dramatically changed a long-standing process. How did employees, town official, and residents respond?
So recently, when I did, you know, come into Lexington, the person who had been there for about 60 years, I think. He had been there since he was a teenager. So when I came in, it was very shocking to everybody, because this man who had been there for so long worked himself up from a broom sweeper in the DPW to becoming the purchasing director of the entire town. He knew everything inside and out. He had a very set way of doing things. He gave a lot of people a lot of power. And when I came in, I had a different way of doing things. So we all had to learn from each other how that was going to go. The first year, I analyzed what people were doing and made small changes. Just said, you know, hey, you need to make sure you fill out these forms. Hey, you need to make sure you do this, and kind of gently brought everybody in. But after that, I started to hold fast to some new rules that people weren't used to. And one that was the most challenging was having people come into my office. People love email and they love phone calls so they can avoid dealing with people one-on-one. However, I think it's really important to have someone come and see you, because I think it gets done faster. I think you understand each other better. There's no sort of email animosity, capital letters, or something strange going on. You can't read what they're asking for. And that was a big change. So every time somebody wanted a contract, I made them come in when the contract was finished, take a look at it in front of me, and just redline. And it may take 15 minutes out of their day, but it was really great because I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have normally had a lot of one-on-one contact with. I also understood their needs better, because they would sit there and talk to me about it while they did it and say, oh, you know what, the reason why I put this is. And so once I started to understand why they were doing things, it made it easier for me to do my job. They got more of what they wanted because it was more effective from having those conversations. And it only took 15 minutes instead of 20 emails that wasted 3 hours worth of time going back and forth over a 4-day span. So it was overall very advantageous, but getting people into your office can be difficult sometimes. They think they're either in trouble or they don't want to go there. I always say procurement is probably the most hated department in town hall because nobody wants to deal with the process. Everyone just thinks it's bureaucratic and annoying, so.
Thank you.
How would you go about correcting the department that the general consensus of the populace is that the department is underperforming?
I think that the first place I would go was I would listen to what everyone had to say about why they felt it was underperforming. I would bullet list all of those items, and then I would go and I would first speak with the department head, because the department head, again, has more knowledge about everything that's going on beneath them. At that point, I would go through each and every one of them and say, hey, what's going on with this? Why is this not working? Why is this not working? And if we couldn't come to a way to bring about a next step, I'm a big fan of saying, hey, these are your problems right now, and we need to figure out a timeline and an efficient way to remedy all these. I do it with vendors all the time when they're in breach of contract. I say, hey, you know, these are the problems that we're having. When can you fix them? How are you going to fix them? And then I give them a little extra time to buffer it in case something comes up. And I think I would take the same exact approach, which is these are the things that people are complaining about and saying are inefficient. If I missed it, that's a problem too. And so I need to figure out what I need to do to make myself more efficient as well. Once we go through all of that, if they don't make those deadlines, then we really need to start asking some more hard questions and maybe breaking it down to what particular parts of that department are failing, and then talk to staff and say, hey, why is this difficult to get done? What's the problem? Where are we disconnecting? Why is it when this needs to be done, it's 3 days late, or it doesn't happen at all? There may be a good reason for it, and we may have to all work together to fix that, or there may be no reason for it, and there may be just someone who just doesn't feel like doing something. So, you know, it could be anything, and I think that's what you have to find out.
What information did you review in preparation for this interview, and what did it reveal about the town?
So I review a lot. I do like to read, but I definitely went to a very extensive process in reviewing as much as I could. I'm not the type to come in and start walking around the town and assuming I'm already the town manager and telling people I'm applying here and let's chat about things, because I think that's more a politician's job to do and not a town manager's job. I think I am staff. I am supposed to be listening to what the people want through their representatives and then applying that as needed. So for me, I looked at the historical basis of the town. I looked into how it was formed. I looked into historical landmarks that are currently here, why they're important, why people like them. I looked into the department heads and found out about what they do on a daily basis, kind of what the different departments are, so I could have a view of how things are broken up in the community. I looked into newspaper articles and backtracked them for a while to see kind of what's going on here on a regular basis. It helps kind of match up your, DOR and cherry sheets to the live action of what's going on, because sometimes you say, oh, look, the fire department has a very large budget. Why is that? And then you say, oh, it's because there's a lot of forestry going on, and so they're going to run into problems with that. Or why are the police having such a high budget? Oh, there's an opiate epidemic right now, and they happen to be near a major highway. So those are types of things that you have to kind of be able to connect the real world with the statistical analysis. So I've looked at both of those in a lot of the cases and try to figure out what the vibe has been through the last, couple years and see what's been going on in town. I also asked around to different town administrators and department folks that are in the area that I know, and asked them, hey, what is West Boylston all about? What are they doing over there? What do people complain about? What do people like? What do they not like? And, a lot of what I heard is everybody loves Leon. So replacing him is almost impossible. And, I heard people are complaining about land and, that they're getting their land devalued. And I know firsthand, my husband is from a farm town, has less than 1,000 people in it. And when you devalue their land, it's over. Like, people want blood at that point. So I could really understand and appreciate why that was such a touchy issue. And the good part is that I understood what was going on with the devaluing of the land, why the watersheds are being expanded by the environmental folks, and why that's a problem for the people in town. So knowing that and being able to connect those dots and knowing the people at the different DOER groups and having connections with folks over there made me feel more confident about being able to tackle that issue when I need to, because I'll be able to handle both sides. I'll know that what my community needs eventually by working with them, and then I know why DOER or the environmental folks are doing what they're doing, and hopefully be able to bridge that gap. I've worked in negotiations, I've been a mediator, and I know how to kind of bring people together and say, let's make this advantageous mutually for everybody, because we don't want just one side to win that. I also looked at just basic things, looking up who is in charge of what. I'm pretty sure everyone's LinkedIn has blown up, so I apologize for that. You've probably seen me looking at who everybody is and finding out, what your backgrounds are, so I can relate better to you and understand where you're coming from when you ask for something. Actually, no, Miss Bonson, you work for the Milford Chamber of Commerce. That was my first job in 8th grade.
Oh, jeez.
I filed in the back conference room and stapled all the letters that went out to everybody. So I thought that was quite funny, actually. So, I do my research on everything, from the people in the town to the community itself. I know that the chief of police in particular, he bought one of the farms, and I know why he did it, and it was the most amazing story to me. I know that Leon was honored in Washington, D.C. This is a lot to live up to, and I'm only here. So, I know that there's a legacy. I know that people tend to stay here for a long time, and that's great for me. I'm, on the younger end of my career, and I really look forward to spending a great deal of time somewhere. I always say I want to start a job that I finish in. I want to stay somewhere. I don't want to be out in 4 years like an average town administrator. That's the standard right now. I don't want to stay somewhere even for 10 years. I would like to just kind of, unfortunately, move in. I want to hang out with you guys for a long time. So that's my goal.
And from everything that all the research that you did, was there any one particular thing about the town that stood out?
Everyone loves this town so much, from the board to the staff to the people that live here. People don't want to go anywhere. As soon as a spot opens up on any of the committees, people who've only been here 2 months want to be on it, never mind people who have been here for years. It's amazing to see anyone love anything that much. I grew up around the metropolitan area, and a lot of people could have really cared less about what was going on in Charlestown that week. If there was a shooting, oh well, moving on. I live in Lynn now, and everyone I'm sure here can, make a lot of jokes about that as well, But I love my neighborhood. I love where I live, and I think it's really important to do things like clean up when you're walking home from the bus station. And Michael Dukakis was a mentor of mine. I've worked with him for a very long time, and he used to make me walk with him and pick up trash. And he said, everything you do impacts your community. From you walking by that piece of trash to you picking it up to just being out. The more people are out in their community, the safer their community is. The more involved you are, the better your community will become. And I've carried that with me forever. Any place I've ever lived, I've always made sure to report graffiti when I was in an apartment in East Boston. Every single day I took the picture, sent it to the thing, and I actually would see them painted. It was fantastic. I'm very much about protecting your community, and that's something that this community does extremely well.
Thanks.
Oh, me, sorry.
Jeez,
I was
come on.
taking all that in still, sorry. How would you go about assessing the strengths and weaknesses of our town and identifying ways to improve?
I would start with the board. I would start with the department heads. I think you all know the town way more than any of my research could ever pull. I do as much as I can to try to have a good base, but you are the bread and butter of the community. So I would be unfortunately bothering you all very much, as well as all the department heads.
In your past experiences, have you had to terminate anyone? And if yes, what was the process that was followed?
Yes. And it's the worst day of your life when you have to do it. I was actually the only person I've ever had to terminate. I was quite young. I was managing a on-campus nightclub that we had at Northeastern University. And it was great because it was an after-hours nightclub, so that there's no drinking involved, and it was a safe place for kids to go to have fun, but at the same time be able to go home safely at the end of the night. And we were open until about 4 o'clock in the morning. Unfortunately, one of our staff members, she would come to work, and then she would promptly sit in the back with the kitchen staff and do nothing. So I would have to keep going back there and prompting her, go see this person and ask if they want a soda, go see this person and see if they, clean the table over there, go check the bathrooms, go do this, go do that. And then one day we had a fire in the kitchen, and she was back there, and she could have gotten very injured, and she shouldn't have been there. So for me, it went from an issue that was just trying to prompt someone to get moving on a very, simple position to a potential, liability and hazard. So I did have to take her to the side and say, listen, you've had a lot of warnings, and I don't think it's working out. And I asked her if she felt as though it was working out, and she said she didn't feel as though it was either. But she did need the job to help pay for her student tuition and her expenses. So I helped her find the office that would get her a different job, and said, you may want to try something different than this, because I think she just didn't want to stay up late at night. There's different things that fit different people, and I always say, there's an expert for everything. There's a reason why I'm not a hairdresser. Everyone would look terrible. So there's different things for different people. In this case, it just was not her cup of tea, so it was time for her to go. And we left it on pretty decent terms, but, it's never easy, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't like me still.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think you answered this one, so I'll go to the next one. What is your professional achievement you are most proud of?
I think the professional achievement I'm most proud of would be becoming the chief procurement officer in Stoughton when I did. I was 28 years old. So that's kind of an unprecedented age for such a high position. And I thought I had really worked very hard to get there. I had done a lot of work. I had spent the hours. I would work until 4 o'clock in the morning at MAPC some nights, just making sure that numbers were right, making sure inventory was logged, making sure public records requests were honored on time in their 10-day span. And I felt like all that work finally culminated into something that was worth it finally. And being able to work with such a fantastic team. And it was hard work. It was very hard work working in a state where you're pulling a town out of corruption, but it was worth every single second. When I got that job, I felt like I finally got to where I needed to be, and I felt very much it had a lot of value to me.
Okay, and what is the worst situation that ever happened to you in your careers?
When I was in Stoughton, because of the situation we had been coming in, there were still some people that were lingering that were part of what had been going on. People were still on trial. Things are still, I think they're still having problems. Actually, the police chief just resigned. So there was always these residual backlash of people being really upset. And we had some media that were in my office on a very regular basis. And they would constantly ask me questions while I was trying to get things done. And I would have to make sure that, they got their information they needed and be as polite as possible. But then someone from the finance committee came in and threatened me with violence. So it was kind of a day where it was very sobering, that there's a lot on the line when it comes to money in towns, and there's a lot of opinions. And when people feel like they may be in trouble for something, they can escalate their emotions to a place that's not safe anymore. And we took care of it in a very calm and you know, collective manner, but it's a scary moment for anybody. And I think that was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with there.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, me, again. I'm back on. I am Kevin, just, the rest of them have been covered on that. All right, you already kind of answered this question because one of these guys. How long, you already said you expect to be here. You'd like to be here for a long time.
Forever.
And we have, and as you probably researched, we've only had 2 town administrators in 20 years.
Yes.
So, we've only had 1 board of selectmen for 3 years, all right. Anyway, the same board. If you were selected for the job, how, when might we see you, and use this, in your corner office? It's because the town
So,
administrator has his office in the corner.
yeah,
Oh,
oh,
With a
that's
window.
nice.
She-
So that is pretty easy to answer. I talked to my own staff about this as well. They asked me the exact same question. How long until you bail on us? And my answer was I would like to give them 4 weeks, just out of, you know, getting everything prepared so that if somebody walks into the office, they know where everything is. Right now, it's in my filing system mixed with an organized filing system. I'd like it just to be in an all-organized filing system before I leave, so that nobody calls me here and asks me to keep coming back every night.
Oh, that's fair, that's very good. What kind of management style do you see yourself bringing to the job with reference to how you handle the public, the town officials, and the employees?
I'm very collaborative. I think that, again, everybody is an expert in their own field, and I want their input. I want as much knowledge brought to the table as possible, and the best way to do that is to get everyone to the table. Another thing that I'm really passionate about with regards to residents is having an open door policy. I don't think it's very common for town administrators or town managers or city mayors to have a time when any department, any staff person, or any resident can walk in, you know, during the day and talk to them. They generally have kind of, you know, a door, and then there's a gatekeeper, and then there's a secretary, you know, so that you can't kind of get in there and bother them too much. But I would probably be one of the types of people that would say, hey, you know, during this month, these are my open office hours. And any staff person that has a question is more than welcome to come during those times. Any department head is more than welcome to come during those times, and any resident is allowed to come during those times. And then that way, there's a dedicated time where everyone feels comfortable, hey, I can drop by. You know, and if that has to be after hours to accommodate the residents, then I'm here.
Okay, almost my last question. As you've probably read, our charter is quite, a little bit different than most charters, because it gives the town administrator a great deal of power. So, having that power, how would you handle a difficult situation? I don't mean with an employee, but with the town resident who's not happy with the street plowing, we'll just say in the winter. How do you handle those tough situations like that?
Again, being very collaborative. I think that everyone being able to feel like they're being heard and having a say in things is the most important thing that you can offer when you're in any position of power. Something that I learned, because I'm at Harvard part-time, and one of the things that I learned last semester from reading a particular book from the Harvard Business School was that if people feel as though they are involved in the process voluntarily, they're allowed to come to the table and do it because they want to, then they feel like they have more power to accomplish what they want to be involved in it, as well as to feel as though they're part of the process. And I believe that's standard. That should always be the case. The townspeople are the reason that we're here. You know, we're here to support them. I'm not here to say, you know, I'm in charge of this town and, I don't know who lives here, but, I'm in charge of it. That's not kind of the way that it works. If I live on that street, that's my street. That's the street that I'm paying to live on. I own that land. And, that, as far as I'm concerned, the land out in front of my house, I also have, priority over. So if they're not plowing and I want to call in, I should be listened to. And for me, I would have a vendor question there. I'd say, why is the vendor we're paying, $110 an hour to go out there and plow, not plowing? What's going on there? So there's a lot of things that you have to connect the dots to. And I think everybody's opinion, everybody's comment is valued. Nobody ever has a stupid question. No one ever has a stupid comment. Everything is worth taking a listen to. And I want the angriest people in the world to walk in and talk to me because they usually have something to say that's of value. And I want the people that usually never talk to also come in because they probably know more than other people do about something. So I think, again, just keeping it very collaborative, letting everybody come in and have a say is very important to me.
Can I ask one more question? It's not on the official list, but.
Knock it out.
No, all right. You're coming from, you make it, this is like a major move, going from where you are, what you do, to becoming the town administrator of a town, even though our budget's just a slight bit less than Lexington. And our town is a little bit smaller, but I guess my question, and I would suppose everybody's, how are you gonna, you need to convince me that you're ready to make this jump from here to there. And so I have confidence that if I appoint you or I vote for you, that you're gonna come through and make the town great like Leon did and we do. No, we don't. Right, Leon. But anyway, I guess that's my question.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair question. Whenever someone hasn't been a town administrator before and is coming from a different and lesser position, that's going to be your first thing. Like, what is she doing? Why is she here? This is totally different, or this is such a huge jump. Everybody has that jump in life. Everyone's going to go from this point to this point, and that's going to be their leap. The luck that I have is that I have a lot of support. So for as much confidence I have in myself that I know the basis of what I'm doing, and as much as I have confidence that I will be working heavily with all the department heads to make sure I know all the things that are going to fall in between those cracks of my knowledge, my confidence, my ability to produce, I'm going to be getting a lot of help from them as well. And that's just a natural progression of any town manager on an everyday basis, I would hope. On top of that, I do have the support of other town managers. The town administrator of Boylston, right next door, is more than willing to help me on a very regular basis. He's put his hands out there to me and said, anything you need. And the town administrator that was my town manager in Stoughton is the same way. He called me on a regular basis and said, do you know about this? Do you know about that? Let's talk about this. If you get that position, we should have some meetings so that we can go through different stuff that you may have, missed along the way. And so having such a great deal of support from local town administrators is also great. But then I've also had this ongoing mentor since I was, 19 years old, which is the former governor, Michael Dukakis. He's been such a great help in everything that I've always done that I can pick up the phone and call him any time of the day and he'll answer and he'll say to me, don't do that. He told me don't go to law school. I didn't listen to him. That's the last time I didn't listen to him. But it's one of those things, having that support, having that network is key to being successful. I think even when you think you know what you're doing, never mind if you're taking a jump to and a leap to a different position. So again, I think it's a combination, my confidence, my ability to do these things, the work I've already laid out in the past and being able to apply that, my education, being able to apply that, my network, being able to apply that, and then having all these great people to work with and their experience and being able to apply that.
Great, thank you, that was very good.
Can I do a follow-up to that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. you have a good understanding of the long days and the long hours, and it seems like it's gonna be a long commute.
It's about an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay.
And I did a longer commute to Stoughton when I worked there.
Okay.
It was an hour and 45 minutes. So the drive's not so much a bothersome for me.
Okay, and you're used to commuting then?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
You have the next question?
Oh, I do. So what is your strength?
I think my strength is being able to work with lots of different folks, no matter where they are, who they are, where they're from. When I was in college, I was an intern at Disney World, and that was such a fun job in general, being a tour guide. But being a tour guide, you have 200 people with you every 20 minutes, and there are 200 very different people every 20 minutes from all over the world. So it was a crash course in public speaking to people that may not even understand English or what you're doing, and they have to follow you for all this time. And working with a bunch of different people is great on that perspective as well. I worked at the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Everybody is angry to be there, and if you can keep people at least happy and entertained, that's always another thing you have to work with. As my career went on, I've always done different things. I've been a negotiator, both for the court system. When I was out in San Diego, I did small claims. I also did negotiations with the organization that I was working in, the National Conflict Resolution Center, and I was a trained mediator there as well. And moving forward, in life, even before that, I worked for Homeland Security right out of college. It was a brand new agency at the time, and I was a negotiator there, and that's a very hard job. People hate going through airport security, and when they think it's okay for them to bring weapons and you take them away, they're even angrier, because people like their things and they don't like you touching them. And we dealt with everything from, clerics that were going through and women can't touch their things, to people that just thought that they packaged what they were supposed to do correctly and they didn't, and then they have a meltdown, and other people that don't want to be touched, but you have to touch them. So I've kind of been through a lot of different phases in my life where I've been placed in very uncomfortable situations where you don't really know what to do, and you have to figure it out. And you're always dealing with different people every day. Luckily in Massachusetts, in a small community, you can say, oh, I'll get to know all these people, and you will, for the most part, so you can feel comfortable in the community. And communities stay pretty distinct. But in those situations, every 20 minutes is a different group of people, so I think I'll be okay with that. That's my strength.
One other follow-up to something that you said that Mr. McCormick asked you, that maybe you would have set hours for people to come in and talk to you. How would you handle if I'm an employee and I've got a real problem today and I call you?
I will make time.
Okay, thank you. What is one goal that you would set for the town and yourself to accomplish within the first year?
I think integrating myself properly is a goal in and of itself in that first year, so that everyone feels comfortable with me, kind of knows my habits, I know theirs. And after that, I think getting people's questions answered, getting things in line, getting a list of to-dos, basically. I always say you should have a list of things that have to get done, and then you should have a wish list after that. So as you get through the things that have to get done, if you have an open slot, you can push in one of those wish list items and continue to pepper it as you go through. I do it a lot in, budget forecasting too. I think it's important for everyone to keep their list of what they need. And if they save some money, they can take one of those wish list items and slide it in there. And each month, you know kind of what you need in January, you know what you need in July, and if you have a little extra money, what you would like to have in July. So I think it's like that with anything. I think I would like to get everybody on that page of starting to make those lists and starting to get themselves organized so that we can hopefully achieve something a little bit better each year. And getting everyone organized for that would be a good feat.
Okay. Give an example of when you were able to meet the professional demands of a similar position, yet still maintain a healthy balance in your personal life.
I think I learned that when I came to Lexington. I think when I was in Stoughton, it was hard because I was working very long hours. I'd be there till midnight some nights because we'd have a Board of Selectmen meeting and it would run over, and you'd be there, and then I'd have my hour and 45-minute drive home, and then I'd wake up and have to leave at 6:30 and, rinse and repeat. So I didn't really know how to balance it, and I would come home and complain, and my husband was just done with that. He did not want it. He didn't care. He didn't want to hear about it. He just wanted me to be home at dinner time. So, when I went to Lexington, I learned that I had to do a lot of organizing on my own behalf to make sure that my day worked in an organic way, so that it felt natural to go to the next task and the next task, and pre-planning that is part of it, but also leaving myself open spaces. And when you leave yourself those open spaces, the good part is you can move things around if you need to, but generally they do get filled up. I don't think I've ever had an open space that stayed that way. But it's good because you can give yourself, over budget your time a little bit if you need to, because you have that space there. You can add something in there that comes up, and that always happens. I have emergencies, I think, about 10 times a week. So, it just doing that, planning for yourself, it helps you plan for your life in general. And I do that at home as well. I have 3 kids at home, so if you don't plan to make time for all of them, one of them is going to riot.
Thank you.
Would you describe an area you struggle with and should continue to work on developing?
I think that my biggest struggle would be continually planning. It's a hard thing to make sure that you don't just say, oh, I don't want to look at that today, I just want to kind of wing it. And, I know I have a meeting at 2, and I know I have this, and, but it'll be fine. And those are the days where you have to go back and say, no, I need to stick to my schedule. I need to be regimented about this, and I need to make sure that I stay on path. Because if I go off path, and my next day is off path, and then it becomes this domino effect. So I think that's an everyday struggle. And, you just have to work through it each time. Make sure you stay on path.
And how do you see your role as a town administrator in working with the school committee and the school superintendent?
Every town has that issue. We always joke that, for purchasing, there's always a town problem with facilities, and there's always a town problem with the school department, because the school department has all the money and everyone else likes to complain about it, and facilities likes to get things done quickly, and they don't want to follow the rules. So for me, I always make sure that I kind of cut it off at the pass. Just go right up to them and say, hey, what are we doing? How are we going to do it? Let's get something moving here. And I have a great relationship with our school in Lexington. They actually send me their bids now to oversee them before they even put them out, because they feel more confident doing that. And by building that relationship and having that rapport, it gave them the ability to do that, and feel comfortable with me, not trying to overtake them, but helping them, and I think that that's the difference is you're not helping, if you're saying you're in charge of somebody, I don't think you should ever be, overruling anyone in these types of situations. I think you should be helping them along and letting them help you along as well. And with the schools, they need a bulk of the money for a reason. I mean, every single town looks that way for a reason. It's not there for, just because they want to be greedy and steal it all. I think the only town I've heard of that has a 50-50 budget is Brookline. And Brookline has a lot of money, so it's probably why they can do that. But Dave Giannakakis over there is doing something great, and we lost our school person, our school business manager, to them just recently, which was Mary Ellen Dunn. She was fantastic too, so I'm sure they're making magic over there now.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, me. I would ask someone, you report to, who do you report to now in Lexington?
The assistant town manager of finance.
If I were to ask him to describe you in 3 words, what would they be?
He'd probably say I talk too fast, because when I need to get stuff done, I try to kind of run through it with him as quick as possible. He would also say that I am probably overly efficient. I'm always trying to get as much done in a week as possible, so he gets more work from me than he had in the past. And he tells me that sometimes, that I'm one of those people that everybody kind of enjoys. Like I walk in and into my office and people are okay with stopping by and saying hello to me and seeing, how they can do things. And in the past, the person who was in that position just did what was being sent in. The paperwork came in, they did it, it got sent out. But I've built a really good rapport with everyone. Not an inappropriate one where it's wasting any time, but one where we're getting a lot done. I've built out a lot of contracts that didn't exist before. We've got a lot of on-call contracts to kind of save people from making errors. And just having that interaction with each other is helping him because he doesn't have to spend as much time worrying about those things. And I take a little bit of the budgeting office back when we can forecast for all those things ahead of time.
Well, he would definitely be right on the first one. Not bad, I'm not saying it's bad. The way you said that.
Yeah. In regards to economic development, what have you been able to do or have you been involved in your current town or past towns that you worked in?
So actually, we just did something, so that's kind of a good time to ask. We have planters in town, down Main Street, and we change them out, seasonally and stuff. So we put Christmas trees in the little planters during one holiday season, and we put, perennials during the next one. Now this is costly because when you're changing plants out constantly, you're paying for the DPW guys to go down there and change them out. You're paying for fertilizer, you're paying for soil, you're paying for flowers and trees and things like that. That's all very expensive, all that landscaping. What I saw when I was up in Maine one day, I was in Paris, Maine, walking down Main Street with my daughter, and I saw that they had these planter boxes, and they had these hanging packets to them, and they had vegetables in them and herbs in them, and then they had this packet that went along with it, and it said what everything was, and it says, please take some home. And they were sponsored by one of the local farms. And every planter box along the way was sponsored by a different farm, because there's a lot of farms in the area, and every single planter box was paid for by that farm. It was maintained by the farm, and everyone would go by and just grab some basil for dinner that night, or grab a tomato, or whatever they wanted. And I said, this is such a wonderful idea, because we're gonna save money by doing it. Lexington has tons of, farms in the area. Why don't we see if this will work for our town? Because the farms are really involved in our community, as well as the fact that the town actually owned one of the farms for a while. We subsidized the Busa farm for such a long time, and we just recently had a bid with it. So I said, let's look into this. And I went down to the economic development director, and I had taken pictures of it all, showed her what it was, told her how to plan it out, and she went ahead and did it. And now on all of our little planter boxes, it says this bin is sponsored by, and it has whatever the chosen item of the time is. And we're actually going to even build out an alleyway where they're going to put more of that and have a nice sitting area and stuff too, so that people can sit down and enjoy Main Street a little bit more, as well as have it sponsored by local communities so they get their visibility and we save some money.
Okay, thank you.
Last question, do you have any questions for us?
I'll probably have more if I get a good letter. I think that the general questions are always, in regards to the packages, that are going to come down if we do get to that point, which I hope that we do. And that obviously doesn't need to be discussed now, because I can read, so I'm going to do that first and, look at everything, and then I'll ask you questions then. I know that there's only 2 of us now, so I know that someone dropped out, and since I know who the population was and that a woman left, I can derive who that person was at this point. So I don't really think I have a whole lot of questions. I think that, I know that you guys do a great job, and I'm not worried about working with anybody on the committee. I think, each and every one of you have done something that's benefited the town, and that's a great thing for me to look forward to working with. I can't say enough nice things about what I've read about the department heads. It just seems like a great community overall, and I understand why someone wants another Leon. You know, somebody said, you know, they want someone who's like the warm, fuzzy person again, and I hope that I'm that person. I hope that I can be that person, because he did do such a great job laying that you know, framework for someone to follow in his footsteps.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
You did a great job.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can we have that?
Yeah, absolutely. You have 2 minutes.
2 minutes? Oh,
Thank you. Great to meet you.
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Just sold the house.
Mr. Chairman, what do we do?
All right.
Okay.
Well, just so everybody knows that's watching, the third candidate did drop out. Sent an email saying that he wasn't interested in the position anymore, so. We got 2 candidates, and we want to thank the administrative search committee. They did a great job and brought us some very viable candidates, and as they did before, they did a great job, and it's really a lot of work they did. Really, they spent a lot of time, a lot of effort bringing us as candidates, so we want to thank them very much. All right, discussion?
I thought both of the candidates were better than the last people we
No,
interviewed.
no doubt.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm gonna make a motion that we commence negotiations with Anita Shipers.
Second?
And discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know, I like this Lindsay Dahlbrook. And, she reminds me of how, and I'm not saying we need another Leo, but she reminds me a lot of him, okay? She looks like a real, somebody you would come in and say good morning to. And prior to Leon, no one ever came in and said good morning to anybody. It was just a war zone here. And I'm not saying that Anita's gonna have that by any means. I don't know Anita's personality as much as I seem to know Lindsay's already, because she just laid it all out on the table there for us. So I think that she would be a good builder. Now, of course, she's never been a town administrator. So she doesn't have any bad habits either that we have to deal with. Because remember, as they go around and become town administrators, they pick up this and they pick up that. Lindsay is one that seems to have stayed in her job for quite some time. She's not a jump around. I mean, she's had a bunch of little jobs there back,
Last year.
all kinds of little jobs. At the same time, she's had other jobs, practically. So I think she was just trying to find her place and what she could do the best. I don't know. I just feel that she would be in our town and with our people and how things operate here, and even with the school committee, that she would work very well with the whole scenario. And yeah, it's gonna be a little learning curve. There was a little learning curve with the last town administrator. And there was a bigger learning curve with the, I don't know, with some other town administrator. But at any rate, that's my feeling, and I just think that she would, I don't know, I felt really good. You know, she's just like happy, and I can do it, and for somebody who's never been a town administrator, she knew a lot about the town administrator stuff. I was surprised, because I thought, if you remember in our last interviews with the other three, if you asked a question about a town administrator, you know, you'd get, well, I can build a police division that does SWAT work. No, we don't care about that, you know? This girl seemed to know how to do what she needs to do, because I think she's dealt with a lot of departments. Maybe not to make the final decision that she would have to do here, but I think she'd do a good job.
Mr. Chairman, I liked Lindsay's background. I liked the diversity. She shocked me once I got to meet her. I liked her energy. I liked the knowledge that she had and the diversity of the background. I feel like she could definitely do this job. She's extremely smart. My impression is she's extremely smart. She has maybe a little different spin on things, but I think that's positive. And I also think that with a strong board and Nancy's guidance, because this is a jump for her, that we could basically help to mold her in her career. And I have no doubt in my mind that she would get along with people. She has a nice way of explaining on how to get the job done without being so rigid that there's no flexibility. I was impressed by both people. Highly impressed. And as Mr. Crowley said, I think this group was way beyond our first set of people. This is not an easy decision, but I think Lindsay has some really great qualities, and I think she would be a great fit to this town, and I'd be proud to have her as our town administrator.
I thought she had a great personality too. I thought she did lack experience. She had a lot of experience in financial. I thought she lacked experience as far as the other business end, which I think we're gonna need for DBW, running the day-to-day basis of the town. And I know you give somebody a chance to learn the job, but I thought the other, Anita was a better fit.
I just think if she came forward, I mean, she has had quite a few jobs, 2-3 months she's worked, but if she's come forward as an assistant town manager, somewhere a town administrator, I think that would be a positive, but I think it's way too big a jump, and I don't think we're in the situation to really have to on-the-job training. I mean, in regards to budget, we got budget coming up right now, I don't think she has much experience in budget. Except for, well,
Sorry.
yeah, except for her, you know, in her little thing, a whole town budget, I don't think she has any experience in it. And that's again, if she was an assistant town manager, maybe in a few years, but, and I haven't, you know, living an hour and 40 minutes away or an hour and 50 minutes away could be an issue. To me, that's my thought.
Well, I think we've had other people commute over an hour to work here, and it didn't seem to be a problem. I see a budget, I've done plenty of budgets, and once you do a budget and you have the idea of what makes that line item up, you're just plugging numbers. And for me, I see her, like you said, the public works. from what her past experiences and all the different departments that she's worked with and combined, I think that wouldn't be an issue. I do agree that there is somewhat of a learning curve. I can't say that every job I ever went for, there wasn't a learning curve, and that's how I'm looking at it. I still think that she would be a great fit. But, you know, I think because she does have such an interest, and this is such a different position for her, that she would adapt and learn, and if, with all her background in education, I can't see that that learning curve would be huge. And maybe everybody that we've hired here has had all the budget capabilities before they came here and done other things. I don't know, this is the first town manager that I've ever, administrator, ever have hired.
I don't think Lindsay would have any issue with the budget piece.
Yeah.
It's just that the lack of overall experience compared in doing a job like town administrator compared to Anita, that I just think Anita would be a better fit. So, but the budget piece with her background, of all the things that she has, I think she has enough experience in budgeting. That would be an easy thing for her to do. It's just the rest of what the job is.
Well, okay, well, I don't think we're gonna change them very much anyway, but,
I'm sorry?
I also understand that, and I can't say this for a fact, because we never hired anybody that was, but they also tell me, I've heard, that when you hire a town administrator that's been a selectman, they try to sit in your seat more than sometimes you'd like, because they know what you're gonna do. Anita's been a selectman in Bolton. Bolton's a nice town, I like Bolton. Lindsay hasn't. I think, I know I'm not gonna change your minds, but I just think she would be a much better fit. She seems to be much more people-friendly, people-happy, people, she smiled a lot. She seemed happy to be here. I guess Anita was not, I got her to smile twice when I made my stupid jokes, but that was about it. Didn't seem to be as people-friendly. And I think we have a very, see, I worked here when there was an unpeople-friendly town administrator, and I worked here when there was a people-friendly town administrator. In the one when there's not a people-friendly town administrator, it's awful. I'm not saying Anita's not. She probably, well, she's worked, how long did she work in Lincoln? 7 years? But she was the assistant. Now she's only been in Hubbardston 3, and I can understand maybe the change from Hubbardston. This is a bigger challenge here than Hubbardston probably is. But anyway, I just think Lindsay would be a really good fit to this town. I don't think I'm gonna convince you guys of that, but, and that, so be it, you know. We'll go forward with whoever we select, so.
I know Anita brought up about the tax situation, and when I was like researching some of that, they were extremely behind in getting the taxes, you know, collected and all that came out. And for me, if, I understand that she couldn't give us a lot of details, but to me, that's something that maybe could have come to the top level of being recognized if your taxes aren't getting paid quickly or like on time, and you're very low in the state of getting your taxes collected. To me, that's already a red flag without having to bring in an audit, and I don't know how long before that happened, and I'm not judging her on that, but to me, that red flag, I think, should have been seen sooner from the information that I have been given. I know that she had been in Boylston. I know that when I researched her, she went back to the position, they didn't hire her. I know that she kind of bounced. She was 2 years in Boylston. City of Worcester, she was 3 years. So I'm just, that shows a little concern. From Air, she was only 4 years. And then went from an assistant manager. In one of the places that I was researching, I noticed that she left for personal reasons, so I don't know if something else was, happening at that point in time. And I wouldn't want to have somebody here and then leave within a year or two. I personally think, at least the way I felt I connected, that the townspeople, as Mr. McCormick was saying, and myself, that Lindsay's young, fresh energy would bring new ideas, would bring a totally different perspective. And to me, I think that's a great thing for this town.
Yeah, I just have one more point, if I may. Let me remind you that we have a police chief who was a sergeant. He had no experience being a police chief. Does a great job. We have a fire chief who was a fireman. He does a great job. We have a lot of people in this town that were never what they were or what they are now before we hired them. And it's worked out very good for us. So the fact, to me, the fact that she's not a town administrator, and she hasn't been, doesn't play that much of a role with me as it does with the fact that I think she's just the right, better fit. I think she's gonna be here for a while, and she'll be happy, and we'll be growing basil plants everywhere, and we'll be good.
I just say I think she will be someday good at town administrator, but I mean, we're talking about time, and she talked about work that she did at the DOR. She worked there for 6 months. She taught UMass for 3 months. Town of Stoughton, roughly 9 or 10 months. I mean, I don't know how possibly she could have told us what she did in those jobs for 6 months. I mean, that's, again, I think in years to come possibly, but I don't think we can be the on-the-job training, pay her and teach her to be a town administrator.
Emails?
No, there's nobody over here.
Any other comments? All right, so we had a motion, a second, and we need a vote. All in favor of Anita, say aye.
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 No?
Opposed?
No?
Make a motion to adjourn?
No,
Oh,
no, I would I would ask if we could make a motion to reconsider that vote, so we can
Second.
have a unanimous vote.
Make a motion to reconsider the vote.
Second.
No, somebody else needs to make the motion.
Didn't
Oh,
he
he
just-
made the
Oh,
motion.
I made the
second.
motion.
All right. All in favor of appointing Anita as town administrator?
Well, I guess it's to reconsider the vote first.
Reconsider the
I'm
vote
sorry.
first.
Aye,
Okay.
Aye.
Aye. Great.
Now make your
Now
motion
someone
again.
needs to make a motion.
to appoint her.
I'll make a motion to appoint Anita to commence negotiations with Anita Shipers to be the next town administrator.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Now, if it's okay with everybody, Kevin and Chris will negotiate the contract with her.
Okay.
Is that good?
Thank you.
You guys will set with that?
Yeah, we're gonna do it like tomorrow, the
Yeah.
next day,
You
and then,
call her, I'll call her now, tell her
yeah.
you picked her, then one of you two will be calling her.
Somebody needs to call Lindsay.
Okay, I'll do that too.
Yeah, why don't you you call her, and then I'll call her back. Tell her I'll call her. You gotta set up a meeting.
Yes,
She lives in Lunenburg, so
I
maybe
will call
you can meet
her,
her halfway somewhere.
and then you guys you call
Yeah.
back tomorrow some separate
Yeah,
time.
tell her I'll give her a call tomorrow.
And then, I will call Lindsay and, tell her, is that okay with everybody?
Yeah, if we can get this done by,
Yeah, 6
Monday we
weeks is a
can-
long time.
post a meeting, and we can have a special meeting on Wednesday and make the appointment official.
But we can talk, I just think getting things back and forth to town council by Wednesday might be an issue, especially
Yeah.
without anybody here to help us type a contract and get things like that done, but
Yeah.
we can talk, but I
We can
think,
try, because the sooner we get her appointed,
Right,
and the sooner she can give that
Yeah, 6 weeks.
6
6
weeks, you
weeks.
could say.
notice. I mean, if we could get her here by March 1st, then, or have her appointed by March 1st, she could be here by the middle of April.
okay. This
So-
is a copy of the old contract, so you guys can.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
All right, now we need a motion.
Motion adjourned.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
That's good.